Hi all, this show will be covering more evidence and supported narrative that validates our From Russia with Love series in bucket loads, and it describes the systematic takeover by a relatively small group of people that has done everything to subvert life, destroy spirituality, consciousness and our own unique way of living. There will be no more illusions where our collective problems globally lies after this show, should the listener grasp and understand it. I say a small group of people because in real terms it is, but they are not all people as we know it, as our series has revealed. The introduction of off-world elements into a narrative often leads many people to turn away from it, due to the sheer indoctrination program done against many on this planet. This leads to a giant chasm of information and understanding missing, and often leads to many things not making any sense. And the only thing that actually makes sense is by adding in and accepting the narrative of the off-world programs and the entities involved. It is the key to many issues on this planet and below it. Tonight we go deeper into a pervading theme of the series, the people known as Jews, except they are not Jews per se. These greed-based psychopaths care not for anyone, least of all the people of the same shared religion. It is very important to distinguish between the two, as broad sweeping plays exactly into their hands as they roll out program after program to control the narrative, the most prominent of which is the money laundering industry known as the Holocaust, and the speech-controlling narrative of anti-Semitism. These greed-based psychopaths all demand monies under the banner of guilt and shame, which is eerily similar to the church, is it not? In fact, it's not similar at all, but the same program, run by the same people and the same off-world entities. Our series documented as far back as 110,000 years ago, when the Koshis, the dark forces, were determined to extinguish what is known as the Great White Race. And no, they were not all white either. So no more white privilege and supremacy memes designed by the same group of dark forces. They were the teachers for the all, not the harvesters of doom and sorrow. Koshis became kosher, in my opinion, known as the sub-grey race. Mass elimination of many white peoples, from the Arya to Hyperborea, to the Rus, to the Aryans, to the Caucasians, and onto the Western world, with their final destination, America. This is playing out now, and all can see it, maybe not understand it, and why it is important for the From Russia with Love series to be spread far and wide. To that end, once a different From Russia with Love 9 is completed, and it is underway, then I will assemble a THI From Russia with Love book club, and we will work on it and produce that book. We will start the first one very soon, likely involving parts 1 through 3. It needs to be seen, heard, absorbed and understood, and it is the key to our future. We cannot go forward to a better future with the echoes of lies and deceptions permeating within and through our midst. We must end the program that bans discourse. Truth must be endured loud and clear, and remember, the truth never feared investigation. To build a home or a brighter future, one must lay foundations. To do that requires digging through the mud and dirt to get to where the foundations begin for a rebuild. These shows are digging through the dirt to allow a brighter future for us all. Our regular listeners to this show have become familiar with the term born in and born to. Born in New York and born to Jewish parents has become a common theme and a pattern for those people who are involved in heinous acts, harvesting and greed-based finances. The evidence of that now is overwhelming. But tonight we will spread the net a bit wider than just New York and see where we stand. Is it a real problem? Or just some people being misunderstood and misrepresented? It is your choice to make. I will repeat again for the closed-minded and hard of hearing. This is not a denigration of Jews or the Jewish, and I will repeat the line again from the book of Revelation 2.9. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. United we stand, divided we fall, and it's something we all need to observe and also absorb, as this is how these people operate, as you'll see. Now, to open this show, I am in part reading an article written by John Q. Publius, which is interspersed with comments and insights by me for deeper clarity. And when this was written, it was called Occidental Observer. Now, Occidental Observer means the one who sees or views from the West. And it starts with this. What has happened since World War II is that the American sensibility has become part Jewish, perhaps as much Jewish as it is anything else. The literate American mind has come in some measure to think Jewishly. It has been taught to, and it was ready to. After the entertainers and novelists came the Jewish critics, politicians and theologians. Critics and politicians and theologians are by profession moulders. They form ways of seeing. And that was a quote from the New York Times theatre critic Walter Kerr back in 1968. In a media-saturated society with said media almost completely under Jewish control, the Jewish way of seeing retains not just its primacy but its virtual monopoly. In such an environment, what you see will be determined for you. And as one who is to be moulded, the aim is for your very will to no longer be your own. And this is what's gone on. The term, they form ways of seeing, is an interesting line, is it not? And as with THI, we are unforming those ways of viewing things, and now we see with a new set of eyes and eye, and also perspective. But this is also referring to the totalitarian creep, which when that word is broken down means to ruin or total the Aryans, and confirms the subtle MK Ultra mind control tactics that have been used on all peoples and countries for thousands of years. And once again I will repeat, this is not a denigration of people known as Jewish. But Jewish is a religion, not a race of people. And they have bound those people to their off-world based religion and made them suffer terribly. whilst a select few of them plunder the world in their name, of which the Jewish peoples carry the can and ire against them due to these peoples, who go by the name of Jews, but are not. And it's way past time to clearly differentiate the people known today as the Jews from the sub-grey race these harvesting psychopaths are from, once and for all. The first category is media, music, film and control. The music industry is, as with all forms of media, dominated by Jews, and its control has become increasingly centralised. Another trend we've seen, irrespective of the industry in question. Now, in December 1998, with the Polygram Universal merger, the music industry's Big Six became its Big Five, and in control of 77.4% of a market estimated to be worth between 30 and 40 billion. Now, in 2004, it saw another merger, this time of Sony and BMG, to then create a Big Four. Coupled with the shrinking of independent labels, the Big Four were in control of 88% of the market by 2011. In December 2011, EMI was absorbed by Universal Music Group and Sony Music Entertainment, though in Europe regulators forced Universal Music to sell off its EMI assets, which became the Parlophone label group, and was then promptly acquired by the third member of the Big Three, Warner Music Group. In 2012, the Big Three represented 88.6% of the market, and a snapshot of the leadership of the Big Three proves indicative. Now, this is an overview from December 2019, reveals an obscene overrepresentation of Jews, including Michael Leighton, chairman of the board of Warner Music Group, and its vice chairman, Len Blavatnik. Now, of the 9 other members of the board, Narina Hertz, Enon Kreitz, Thomas H. Lee, and Alex Blavatnik, who is Len's brother, are all Jewish. Matthias Dopner is a Gentile, but is also described as non-Jewish Zionist. A key term now, non-Jewish Zionist. That's what these people really are. The rest, such as Stephen F. Cooper, also the CEO, who replaced the Jewish Edgar Bronfman Jr., are either contested or I could not definitively find out. The co-chairman and CEO of Warner Records, Aaron Bay Schuck, has Jewish ancestry, and other prominent Jews in the management, including the COO of subsidiary Atlantic Records Group, Julie Greenwald, and its CEO, Craig Coleman. The Universal Music Group chairman and CEO, Lucian Grange, is Jewish, as are the chairman and CEO of the Universal Music Publishing Group and the Global Publishing Division, Jody Gerson. The chairman and CEO of Universal Music UK and Ireland, David Joseph, Executive Vice President of Marketing, Andrew Kronfeld. The Sony CEO, Robert Stringer, is Jewish, as is its COO, Kevin Keller. Executive Vice President and General Counsel, Julie Swidler, and President of Global Digital Business and US Sales, Dennis Kuka. In other words, all 3 major record labels are headed by Jews, and their corporate governance is dominated by Jews as well. As for the rest, like RCA Records CEO Peter Edge, are well-liked Gentiles. Their quote, not mine. Just 4 conglomerates control 90% of the entire US television and films market. Comcast, including NBC Universal, Disney, Viacom, CBS, controlled by National Amusements, and AT&T, including Warner Media. These conglomerates are in fact almost entirely Jewish-owned. Now, the Jewish are overrepresented at places like CNN, which is a Warner Media subsidiary, by a factor of 25, and are overrepresented amongst senior executive positions at the major television broadcast networks, cable networks, and movie production companies by a factor of 44.5%. Now, with positions as current as December 2019, we see that Bob Bakish, President and CEO of Viacom CBS, is Jewish, as are John T. Sankey, the CEO of Warner Media and President and COO of AT&T. The Comcast Chairman and CEO, Brian L. Roberts. Jeff Zucker, Chairman of Warner Media and President of CNN Worldwide. Bob Iger, Chairman and CEO of Disney. Jeff Shell, Chairman of NBC Universal Film and Entertainment. Ron Meyer, Vice Chairman of NBC Universal. David L. Cohen, Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer of Comcast. Kent Alterman, President of Comedy Central under Viacom CBS, Paramount Network, also under Viacom CBS, and TV Land under MTV Networks, which is a division also of Viacom CBS, which also owns MTV, VH1, Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon Jr. Shari Redstone, President of National Amusements and Chairwoman of the Board for Viacom CBS. Sumner Redstone, Majority Owner and Chairman of the Board of National Amusements. Through National Amusements, Redstone and his family are majority voting shareholders also of Viacom CBS and its subsidiaries such as MTV Networks, Paramount Pictures, Comedy Central, and BET. Randall L. Stevenson, Chairman and CEO of AT&T and former National Chair of the Boy Scouts of America during its inclusivity demise, when girls were allowed to join the Boy Scouts. Now, he is not Jewish, but was awarded an honorary yarmulke. Other recent principal figures include Jeffrey Katzenberg, former Disney chair and co-founder of DreamWorks Entertainment, The Wonder Co. and Quibi, and a major donor formerly to Barack Obama. That will become a common theme. Michael Eisner, former chairman and CEO of Disney. Ralph J. Roberts, co-founder, former CEO and chairman emeritus of the board of Comcast. Richard Plepler, member of the Council of Foreign Relations and also chairman and CEO of HBO, which is under Warner Media. The former Time Warner CEO, Gerald Levine. Les Moonves, chairman and CEO of CBS Corporation from 2003 until his resignation in September 2018, following numerous allegations of sexual harassment and abuse, and current member of the board of directors at ZeniMax Media. The former Paramount chairman and CEO, Brad Gray. Jordan Levine, member of the Warner Brothers founder executive team and former CEO. former Microsoft Xbox Entertainment Studios Executive Vice President General Manager to produce original programming. Also the founder and former CEO of Generate, a production studio and talent management company. He was also the former Chief Content Officer at the NFL, former CEO of Awesomeness, an American media and entertainment company eventually purchased by Viacom, and current General Manager of Rooster Teeth, an entertainment company and subsidiary of Otter Media, which is also a subsidiary of Warner Media. Julian Brodsky, a co-founder and former CFO and Vice Chairman of Comcast, as well as co-founder and former Chair of Comcast Interactive Capital, which is Comcast's venture capital unit, or vulture capital unit is the correct term. We should also not ignore the remaining 10%, most of which is divided between Vivendi, Sony and Bertelsmann. Nor can we ignore other major players in affiliated industries such as producers, agents, writers and talent scouts. And we certainly cannot ignore social media and other online platforms not considered part of the traditional media market, though no less important to the media apparatus, and is arguably more so. Once again, with positions current as of December 2019, we see the same obscene overrepresentations of Jews, including Tom Rothman, Chairman of Sony Pictures Motion Picture Group, Josh Greenstein, Co-President of Sony Pictures Motion Picture Group, Peter Chernin, former News Corp Chairman and current Chairman and CEO of the Chernin Group, and assets include Chernin Entertainment, a majority stake in California Media, an Asian-based media investment company, and Pandora, Fullscreen, Tumblr, Barstool Sports, and also Flipboard. Record company magnate and DreamWorks co-founder David Geffen, Lionsgate CEO John Feldheimer, Lionsgate Chairman Mark Rachesky, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg with a silent F, whose real name is Greenberg, Facebook COO and ADL donor Sheryl Sandberg, YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki, and who her sister founded 23andMe, and yes, they're linked. Do not give them your DNA. Former co-chair of Sony Pictures Entertainment and current head of Pascal Films, which produced the atrocity known as the Ghostbusters remake, Amy Pascal, Relativity Media CEO Ryan Cavanagh, committed Zionist, as he is quoted as, Sam Zell, founder and chairman of the Equity Group Investments and former owner and CEO of the Tribune Company, which counted amongst its assets 23 television stations, a baseball team, and many major newspapers, including the Chicago Tribune and the Los Angeles Times. Super agents Scooter Braun and Ari Emanuel, who is Rahm Emanuel's brother and the inspiration for the character Ari Gold in the HBO series Entourage. Evan Seidenberg, former chairman and CEO of Verizon Communications Inc., Joel Klein, former CEO of Amplify, executive vice president at News Corp and former chairman and CEO of Bertelsmann Inc., Lloyd Braun, chairman of the ABC Entertainment Group from 2002 to 2004 and former head of Yahoo Media Group, who partnered with Gail Berman to form the entertainment company Berman Braun, eventually becoming the sole owner and renaming the company Whale Rock Industries. Mort Zuckerman, owner of the US News and World Report, former owner of the New York Daily Times, The Atlantic and Fast Company, and former chair of the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish American Organizations, which is one of the largest pro-Israel lobbying groups in America. Haim Saban, founder of Saban Entertainment, the Saban Music Group, and Saban Capital Group, a stakeholder in Univision. Saban is quoted as saying, "I am a one-issue guy and my issue is Israel." Mega producer and member of the board at ZeniMax Media, Jerry Bruckheimer. Former Warner Brothers chairman and CEO Barry Meyer, who was also on the board of directors for the San Francisco branch of the Federal Reserve. Harry Sloan, former chairman and CEO of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and board member at ZeniMax Media, ZeniMax chairman and CEO Rob Altman. And ZeniMax legal counsel is none other than D.L.A. Piper, which features prominently in the series The Way Life Should Be. The Fox Entertainment CEO Charlie Collier. Michael Lighton, again from earlier, also CEO of Sony Corporation of America, now chairman of Snap Inc., which is Snapchat, and as mentioned, chairman of the board of Warner Music Group, and Lighton is also a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, and his brother-in-law is, quote, progressive journalist and correspondent Jonathan Alter, and his mother-in-law, Joanne Hammerman Alter, was a politician who worked closely with Bella Abzug, all of them Jewish. Nicole Seligman, former president of Sony Corporation of America and also Sony Corporation General Counsel and former representation of Oliver North during the Iran-Contra hearings. Of course there will be Jewish counsel on that hearing, in case the world found out that the real deal behind that was not only was the CIA supplying Iran with weapons, but the fact that Israel sold nuclear weapons to Iran in the 1980s. Oops. She was also counsel for Bill Clinton during his impeachment trial. Her husband, Joel Klein, was an official in the Clinton administration and is the former Chancellor of the New York City Department of Education. Preceded by the Jewish Harold Levy and appointed by the Jewish Michael Bloomberg, is an illustrative example of Jewish nepotism. Now, Wikipedia states that Klein, quote, never obtained the common formal credentials that one would have to take in a leadership role in a public school system and had a short duration of teaching experience. And in 2005, Klein fired Rashid Khalidi from the teacher training program for his views on Israel. So, as it stated, Klein did not have the credentials but got in anyway. That is just like the Stanley Milgram story from a recent show of ours, is it not? Funny how that always happens. Leonard Blavatnik, mentioned earlier, is also the owner of AI Films and the founder of Access Industries, the New York Times company controlled by the Jewish Sulzberger family through a dual-class share structure. Donald Edward Newhouse, owner of Advanced Publications, whose properties include Condé Nast, dozens of newspapers across the US, the cable company Bright House Networks, which is now Spectrum, and a controlling stake in Discovery Inc. and is president and CEO of Discovery Inc. David Zaslav. Zaslav serves on the board of Sirius XM Radio Inc., also Lionsgate Entertainment, the National Cable and Telecommunications Association, the Cable Center, the Center for Communications, Grupo Televisa, the Partnership for New York City, and the USC Shoah Foundation, and is also the chairman of the Auschwitz. The Past is the Present Committee. Busy man. The Go Ogle co-founder and Alphabet Inc. president Sergey Brin. Go Ogle co-founder and Alphabet Inc. CEO Larry Page. The Weinstein brothers, Harvey and Bob, of the now defunct Weinstein Company movie studio. Former vice chairman of the board and CEO of Vivendi Universal, and former Warner Music Group chairman and CEO Edgar Bronfman. Now is a managing partner at Accretive LLC, which is a private equity firm focused on creating and investing in technology companies. No surprise there. And the list goes on. Now, Bronfman is the son of Edgar Miles Bronfman and the grandson of Samuel Bronfman, patriarch of one of the wealthiest and most influential Jewish families in Canada. Now, the Bronfman family gained its fortunes through the Seagram Company, which is an alcohol distilling company. Edgar Jr. is the second of 5 children of Anne Loeb and Edgar Miles Bronfman. His mother was the daughter of John Langeloth Loeb Sr., who was a Wall Street investment banker whose company was a predecessor of the Shearson Lehman American Express. And Francis Lehman is a scion of the Lehman Brothers banking firm, which all went tits up. Edgar M. Bronfman Jr. is the son of Edgar Bronfman Sr., the billionaire businessman and long-time president of the World Jewish Congress, who died at age 84 in 2013. And he is the half-brother of Claire Bronfman, who as a 39-year-old was charged in 2018 in the Nexium sex trafficking case. In 1979, Bronfman married his first wife, Sherry Brewer, an African-American actress in New Orleans, and Bronfman's father did not approve of the marriage and said, "I very much wanted for him to end the relationship because I told him all marriages are difficult enough without the added stress of totally different backgrounds." Now, Sherry offered to convert to Judaism, which, although well-intentioned, he says, was not the point. And this is further proof of the media-based illusion that only whites are racist, when in fact the most racist book ever written is the Talmud, all of which these greed-based merchants all follow and abide by. Now, in 2011, Bronfman was found guilty in a French court of insider trading as Vivendi chief and received a 15-month suspended sentence and a €5 million fine. So this could all be sound and fury, signifying nothing. However, as these people just happen to be Jewish, and the former Anti-Defamation League National Director Abe Foxman, and thus shouldn't we make anything of the comments by Robbie Brenner, who is the head of Mattel Films and president of the firm's film division, where he said everyone had a similar kind of look, the know your tribe look. the Jews from New York, unquote. Or that in writing a screenplay for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, co-writer and former Focus Features CEO James Schamus says that trying to create authentic Chinese characters, he tried to write them in as being, quote, as Jewish as possible, unquote. We shouldn't make anything of the fact that, as Michael Conrad wrote, the popular TV show Bridget Loves Bernie was cancelled because some Jewish pressure groups were furious that American TV approved of Jewish Christian intermarriage. Meredith Baxter said we had bomb threats on the show. And some guys from the Jewish Defence League came to her house and said they wanted to talk with her about changing the show. Threatening phone calls were made to the home of the producer Ralph Riskin, resulted in the arrest of Robert S. Manning, who is described as a member of the Jewish Defence League. Now, Manning was later indicted on murder charges and fought extradition to the US from Israel, where he had moved to. Needless to say, that quite popular show was cancelled because of the Jewish Defence League. And this is a common issue whereby any of this Jewish network are caught in a crime in America. They are flown out and into Israel and they go missing and avoid the authorities. There has been a number of sexual crimes committed which we'll cover shortly, and these people fly out to Israel and avoid extradition. Hello, Mr. Epstein. Just saying. Ironically, soon after that show was cancelled, the CBS network didn't mind featuring an interracial couple on The Jeffersons. Similarly coincidental and inconsequential from the Jewish Media Power, Myth and Reality by Ilana Levine and Michael Z. Newman, where it said, in a society in which Jewish identity exists in tension with genteel whiteness, Jewish power over media has been a source of much anxiety as celebration. Genteel whiteness. What about all the other colours that are genteel? Indicative? You decide. The new movie studios and networks were run largely by Jewish immigrant moguls or their offspring. The Warner Brothers, Adolf Zucker, Paramount, David Sarnoff, RCA and NBC, and William S. Paley, CBS, amongst others. Both news and entertainment fields remain hospitable to Jewish artists and business people, from CEOs like Bob Iger, Disney, and producers and company presidents like Jeff Zucker, CNN and NBC, to writers and directors like Nora Ephron and Steven Spielberg. Jewish journalists have led the most influential news organizations in the United States, including The Times and The Washington Post. Jews are heavily represented in creative and media workplaces and occupy many positions of prestige and also authority. Even PBS, the nation's largest non-commercial media organisation, with nearly 350 member stations throughout the country, is under Jewish management in the form of President and CEO Paula Kerger. And it's not just the American media either. The Rothschilds have their tentacles in all sorts of British media, from the BBC to The Economist to The Guardian. 6 of Sweden's 7 major newspapers are Jewish-owned. The Bronfman's family Seagram Company has an outsized footprint in the Canadian media. The 3 most watched non-state-owned television stations in Finland are under the control of Sanoma, WSOY, and Alma Media, which are all Jewish-owned. And the 2 companies own a majority stake in the nation's premier news agency also. The most widely circulated newspapers in Latvia are Jewish-owned. LNK TV in Lithuania is Jewish-owned. Several premier business papers such as Finance in Slovenia, Arapev in Estonia, and Pol's Biznesu in Poland are all Jewish-owned. A substantial swathe of the Danish media and finance commentariat is Jewish, and once again the list goes on. And then we look at a report that came out recently where it stated only 22% of Americans now believe the movie and television industries are pretty much run by the Jewish, which is down from 50% in 1964. The Anti-Defamation League, which released the poll results last month, sees in these numbers a victory against stereotyping. Actually, it just shows how dumbed down America has gotten, it says, according to the report, and the Jews totally run Hollywood. The article said it makes no sense at all to try to deny the reality of Jewish power and prominence in popular culture. And in August 1996, the Jewish magazine Moment, which describes itself as North America's premier Jewish magazine, founded in 1975 by Nobel Prize laureate Elie Wiesel. I'm sure it's pronounced somewhere else, but that'll do for me. Weasel by name, Weasel by nature. And that ran a front page article titled "Jews Run Hollywood, So What?" and was written by the Jewish journalist Michael Medved. Well, Elie Wiesel went on building on an idea by another of their ilk, Henry Kissinger, to build and run the Jewish Museum in New York. And despite collecting millions per year, 50 to 100 million as I understand it, it gives nothing of it back to the real Jewish people. Zero. Many of which live in total poverty in New York itself, which in my book, like Black Lives Matter donations, makes it a scam. Any list of the most influential production executives at each of the major movie studios will produce a heavy majority of recognisably Jewish names. Jewish writers and directors employ unquestionably flattering depictions of Jews for audiences to react with sympathy and affection. The combined weight of so many Jews in one of America's most lucrative and important industries gives the Jews of Hollywood a great deal of political power. And the article states they are a major source of money for Democratic candidates. Oops. The industry's informal patriarch MCA chairman Lou Wasserman wields tremendous personal clout in state and national politics. So do Barbra Streisand, Norman Lear and others. And there is even a commercially available book about the Jewish control of Hollywood written by a Jewish person named Neil Gabler, titled An Empire of Their Own, indeed, How the Jews Invented Hollywood. And on page 263, Gabler even describes this takeover as the work of a, quote, Jewish cabal, unquote. On the first page of his book, he states how the industry was supervised by Jews and goes on to detail the workings of the Jewish network and specifies how the studios preferred to deal with other Jews. Gabler also reveals that the Hollywood Jews practice anti-Gentile discrimination. Those Goyim, Harry Warner would yell in derision, or he is a nice fellow for a Goy. A Jew might say that, but only in their inner sanctums when they are safe among fellow Jews, and even then, only verbally. Now, the sheer depth of this list should alarm anyone. It's not congruent on so many levels. Ignoring the propensity of these people to control and subvert the populace with their pro-pagan dart. How is one group, regardless of religion, nationality or colour, dominating so much of industry? And not just media either. This is a monopoly on a massive and quite staggering scale and encourages greed-based harvesting on all levels. And this is why it's imperative we build our own brand for and by the people, the People's Club. And the premise of the People's Club is there is no individual ownership, but it's equally shared amongst us all colours, all cultures and all countries coming together as equals. That then allows a clockwise flow which touches everyone, not the anti-clockwise flow which is harvested and collected by the few. All the above wealth accumulated by these people, and not one of them will help their own people, never mind anybody else. There are millions of poverty-stricken Jewish people around the world, and these greed-based merchants, despite vowing that we are God's chosen people, can't even look after their own. The fake Holocaust Museum in New York, generating $50 to $100 million a year in donations, and it's all going to feed the war machine in the so-called God's chosen country. When there's thousands of Jewish people in New York alone in abject poverty and living in squalor, and not one of the above will put their hand in their pocket to help them. No, their pockets are anti-clockwise only, and it's shameful. A group basing their whole history on a fake book written by a crown-based agent called King James that has all British names as disciples and several names with the letter J, which never existed until the 15 or 1600s. But that book has laid the foundation for hundreds of thousands of deaths over the past 500 years alone. In fact, millions of deaths. And allowed these psychopaths to take over everything based on running a guilt and shame scam on the whole world. This hegemony has to be ended, and the world will return to peace, prosperity and abundance this group have denied us for tens of thousands of years. To us all, nothing else matters. I used the word before the break called hegemony, which means the political, economic or military predominance or control of one state over others. And the term cultural hegemony was a Marxist term, Marx also being of Jewish origin and not a coincidence. And this is the idea that the ruling class can manipulate the value system and the mores of a society so that their view becomes the worldview. Sound familiar? Now, in contrast to authoritarian rule, cultural hegemony is hegemonic only if those affected by it also consent to and struggle over its common sense. And this explains why the bots consent and struggle then, doesn't it? As it seems common sense doesn't exist in their world. So having established their absolute control of the media, we come to a different type of media and investigate whether their domination applies there as well. This type of media is far more seedy and underground in many aspects, and involves hidden criminality and systematic abuse. This is the world of pornography. Robert J. Stoller, ND, in his 1991 book, Porn, Myths of the 20th Century, sought to understand the mentality of the people involved in the hardcore pornography business. And while interviewing some of the actors and actresses in California, he was told, quote, "If you are welcomed into the porn scene, it's unbelievable. It's an extended family. So many Jewish people involved with it." Unquote. Today, most porn movies and porn videos in America are produced by Jewish in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. This is located just north of Los Angeles in a sprawl of seedy suburbs known to locals as Porn Valley, or the other Hollywood. Here, Jewish are the kingpins of the sex industry and own every single major studio. Chief among these is Vivid Entertainment, reportedly the largest porn production company in the world. This is owned by Jewish multi-billionaire Stephen Hirsch, sometimes known as the Porn King. Vivid Entertainment generates an estimated $100 million a year in revenue, cranking out 60 films per year and selling them in video stores, hotel rooms, on cable systems and on the internet. Sex is a powerful thing, Hirsch notes complacently, and this is the right time for us, he stated. Another billionaire Jewish porn mogul, Paul Fishman, founder of Adult Video News, AVN, is also headquartered in Porn Valley, California. Fishman's business associates Ervin Slifkin, Barry Rosenblatt and Eli Cross are all fabulously rich Jews. So make no mistake, Porn Valley, California is a Jewish enclave and is as Jewish as Tel Aviv or Brooklyn. Now, according to the British charity National Children's Homes, 55% of the world's child porn is made in America. Despite dominating the porn industry as a whole, the Jewish are not in the forefront of this sordid enterprise. But pedophilia is a worldwide phenomenon, and it is an undeniable fact that a large number of Jewish who practice it and yet appear to do so with a certain impunity. Roman Polanski, after he had drugged and raped an unconscious nymphette, got off the hook lightly. All he had to do was buy a one-way ticket to Paris, France, and nothing was done to bring him to justice. The same applies to Woody Allen, did it not? Also born in and born to, who began his career as a comedy writer on Your Show of Shows, working alongside Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Larry Gelbart and Neil Simon. Brooks, Reiner and Simon, again all born in and born to, whilst Gelbart was born in Illinois to Jewish parents. It's one giant in-house club, as revealed. Now, of course, Woody Allen went on and performed as a stand-up comedian in Greenwich Village alongside Lenny Bruce, Elaine May, Mike Nichols and Joan Rivers. All four of those guests were all Jewish also, two of them born in New York. Now, in July 2000, the Brazilian police tried to arrest the Israeli vice consul in Rio de Janeiro, Ari Sher, as he was wanted on suspicion of running a child porn ring from the Israeli embassy there. Vast quantities of pornographic material have been found on his computer, and I'm having a little bit of a deluge at the moment. And a federal crime normally carrying a 20-year sentence, David Asimov was to receive a slap on the wrist and 6 months home detention. A bit like Epstein in 2006, that is it not? So how is it he got off so lightly? Well, look at the players yields the answer. News report reads, Asimov's child porn stash was so big that many child victims and perpetrators would have taken a fall had Asimov been zealously prosecuted at trial, it was said. There is one law for the Jews, it seems, and another for us less mortals. A CBS News investigation has found that many accused American pedophiles also flee to Israel, and bringing them to justice can be difficult. The Jewish Community Watch, JCW, which is an American organisation that tracks accused pedophiles, has been trying for years to find Jimmy Caro to bring him to justice. He abused a 9-year-old girl in Oregon and then fled to Israel. JCW says Caro and other wanted men and women have been able to exploit a right known as the law of return, whereby any Jewish person can move to Israel and automatically gain citizenship, which then prevents extradition. Now, since the small organisation started tracking accused pedophiles in 2014, it says more than 60 have fled from the US to Israel. And given its limited resources to identify these individuals, JCW says the actual number is likely much larger. And there is an extradition issue in Israel that allows pedophiles to flee there and escape prosecution due to the complicated extradition rules. And this is why I suspect Jeffrey Epstein is actually being held there. And when you throw in Brofmans, Disney controllers, Epstein, Maxwell's, and a much bigger picture emerges from less than 2% of the American population. Now, 55% of the world's child pornography is produced in the US, according to the British charity National Children's Homes. 23% of the world's child porn is produced in Russia. Whether or not Russian child porn is dominated by Russian Jews remains a nebulous issue, according to the report, but there is a high probability that it is, given that there is more than enough solid evidence of Russian Jewish involvement in sex trafficking, kidnapping, pedophilia, and even child murder in the form of production of snuff porn movies. This is a report first published in October 2000, and it will give the readers and listeners some idea of the depths of depravity to which some pornographers are willing to sink. Italian and Russian police working together broke up a ring of Jewish gangsters who had been involved in the manufacture of child rape and snuff pornography. 3 Russian Jews and 8 Italian Jews were arrested after police discovered they had been kidnapping non-Jewish children between the ages of 2 and 5 years old from Russian orphanages and then raping the children and then murdering them on film. These were sold to mostly non-Jewish customers, including 17,000 nationwide, 600 in Italy, and an unknown number in the United States. And they paid as much as $20,000 per film to watch the little children being raped and murdered. Now, Jewish officials in a major Italian news agency tried to cover the story up, but were circumvented by Italian news reporters who broadcast the scenes from the films live at primetime television in Italy to more than 11 million Italian viewers. The Jewish officials then fired the executives responsible, claiming they were spreading, quote, blood libel, unquote. Really. Although AP and Reuters both ran the stories on the episode, the US media conglomerates refused to carry the story on the television news, saying that it would prejudice Americans against Jews. Really? This is in the backdrop, and according to the Talmud, 3-year-old girls plus 1 day like this are fair game for sex with adults. That comes from the Sanhedrin 54b. Killing them is permissible too. The best of the Gentiles deserve to be killed, was said by the revered Rabbi Ben Yohai, and again states authoritatively in the Talmud. $20,000 per film is a lot of money for most people today. But that was 20 years ago. It was a small fortune. Which tells us one thing. Only the rich and the so-called elite were paying and watching this utter filth. And yet so many in this and other countries look up to these rich and elites as some sort of demigods, whilst in the background and away from prying eyes, they are up to the most disturbing and disgusting shit ever. And they're all involved. The general public is close to finding out most of their TV stars in movies, theatre, musicians and politicians may have all participated in this type of skullduggery in some form or other. That is the price you pay in this world for the illusion of what they call fame. It is called selling your soul out for a reason. And here is what Brother Nathaniel Kapner has to say on the subject. And it's a fairly neat summation, and the fact that Kapner is Jewish makes his words even more compelling, and why we cannot broad sweep these people. Quote, "The degradation of Western Christian social life did not merely happen, it was planned, deliberately fostered and spread as outlined by the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. This systematic undermining of the culture of the West continues today. The instruments of this assault on Christian culture and consciousness are the weapons of propaganda, the press, television, cinema and education. And the chief fount of the propaganda is the cinema," he said. From his capital in Hollywood, the Jew spews out an endless series of perverted films to debase and degenerate the youth of America and the Western world. Divorce replaces marriage, abortion replaces birth, and the family becomes the battleground of individual strife. The Jew has attained his goal in destroying Western culture. A few things about that is, the Western culture is not Christian. Christendom is a spin-off from the Zionist-based Talmud book. And the original Western culture was Rus, Aryan and Slavic, and nothing to do with Rome or the Church. But to state the Jews are entirely to blame for the decline and fall of Western culture is, in my opinion, pure folly. It takes two to tango. And if the West has gone to hell in a handbasket, as Nathaniel Kapner was saying, in my opinion, the Westerners are as much to blame for allowing it and themselves to stoop to those levels. We cannot just keep pointing fingers away from us, and this show will never ever do that. We are all partially responsible for the mess on this planet. It's like the old saying, if I asked you to put your hand in the fire, would you do it? Springs to mind here. And they say the society we get is the society we deserve. Mr. Kapner went on, but there is little doubt now that the virulent sex epidemic we witness all around us today is a deliberately planned sexual psyop of epic proportions, all supported by our governments, as most of them have been involved in child porn or abuse. The puppet masters who pull the hidden strings of our Western regimes, all masquerading as democracies, have managed to manufacture exactly what we see when we look around us today. Widespread neurosis, mass misery, the collapse of moral values, Christianity in ruins, and the coarse brutalisation of the common man. That was Mr. Kapner. But Christianity is in ruins now, as many now are seeing through the illusion of it. And also the powers that be want to delete it now in favour of a one-world religion. The Talmud is their religion. There is no need for gulags for those who consent to their own chains. Right, the next topic we're going to go into is wealth. And yet again, wealth is also disproportionately concentrated in the hands of global Jewry. And depending on the year in question, the percentage of the Forbes 400 for the 400 wealthiest Americans is usually around 1/3 or more, despite comprising of just 1.5% of the US population. And in 1987, Nathaniel Whale found 23% of American billionaires were Jewish, whereas for the last decade the number has settled in at around 35%. In both 2009 and 2013, for example, the Jews represented 35% of that list. 11.6% of the world's billionaires are Jewish, despite the Jewish accounting for 0.2% of the world's population. And the Jews are over 100 times more likely to be billionaires than everyone else on earth. 5 of the top 7 wealthiest Australians are Jewish, despite accounting for less than 0.5% of the nation's population. 20% of Britain's super rich are Jewish, and most of them are immigrants. All of Monaco's billionaires are Jewish. The Jews are 25% of Canada's billionaires, with only roughly 1% of the population, 13% of Brazil's billionaires with only 0.5% of the population, and 43% of the Ukraine's, again roughly 1% of the population. Jews are roughly 17 times more likely per capita to make the Forbes 400 than is the rest of the American population. 46% of Jews earn more than $100,000 a year, compared to just 19% amongst all Americans. And IQ differential alone is not enough to explain this disparity. The overrepresentation is too dramatic. The Jews, by the way, are 26.4% of South Africa's wealthiest individuals also, whilst representing an absurdly small population of 0.014%. And they have profited enormously from the diamond trade, and things are clearly going well for the Jews in South Africa, but for the whites it's a different story. Henk van de Graaf, quote, "The farmers live in fear because being a farmer in South Africa is the most dangerous occupation in the world. The average murder ratio per 100,000 for the population in the world is 9. In South Africa, it's 54. But for the farming community in South Africa, which is mainly white, it is 138, which is the highest for any occupation in the world. By comparison, Chicago is 28% per 100,000 and St. Louis is 35 per 100,000 as a point of reference. Whites are less than 9% in the South African population, but are 40% of all the murder victims. South Africa has a 95% black on white murder rate and the world's highest rape rate. There are government-sanctioned policies to seize land from the white farmers and redistribute it to markedly less productive blacks. This happened in Zimbabwe. And it should be noted that the virulently anti-white Economic Freedom Fighters Party, helmed by Julius Malema, derives its funding from the Jewish Swazi billionaire Nathan Kirsch. What was it Israel Cohen said? We're going to use the blacks to harm the whites. There it is in action. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Israeli billionaire Dan Gertler has made a fortune exploiting the country's natural resources through his political connections and the use of offshore tax havens. Gertler has stakes in companies that control 9.6% of the world's cobalt production, based on US Geological Survey data and company figures. And that is just the beginning of Gertler's influence in the Congo, which is the largest country of sub-Saharan Africa, with the world's richest deposits of cobalt and major reserves of copper, diamonds, gold, tin and coltan, an ore containing the metal tantalum, which is used in consumer electronics. His Gibraltar-registered Floret Properties Limited owns stakes in various Congolese mines through at least 60 holding companies in offshore tax havens such as the British Virgin Islands. Gertler, whose grandfather co-founded Israel's Diamond Exchange in 1947, arrived in the Congo in 1997 seeking rough diamonds, and the 23-year-old trader struck a deep relationship with Joseph Kabila, who then headed the Congolese army and today is the nation's president. Now, since those early days, Gertler has invested in iron, ore, gold, cobalt and copper, as well as agriculture, oil and banking. And in the process, he's built up a net worth of at least $2.5 billion. He also acquired a roster of critics. Many of the government's deals with Gertler's deprive the Congo's 68 million people of badly needed funds. And this is according to the London-based anti-corruption group Global Witness and the lawmakers from Congo and the UK, which is the country's second biggest aid donor after the US. And Jean-Pierre Mateba said Dan Gertler is essentially looting Congo at the expense of its people. Now, Mr. Mateba is the head of a group of non-governmental organisations that monitor the mining sector in the Katanga province, where most of the Congo's copper is located. There is also anecdotal cases of powerful Jews like Roman Abramovich in Russia. He's also. And Ilan Shaw in Moldova, fleeing to Israel after committing major financial crimes, which surely can only confirm the anti-Semitic stereotypes. And it's not just private citizens or politicians either, but perhaps the most insidious of all, the global finance sector and its money men. As just one example, recall Dominique Strauss-Kahn, as in Cohen, the Jewish former head of the IMF, the same one that liberals used to protest against for pillaging the Third World. Strauss-Kahn headed the IMF while Greece was forced into taking its first bailout, which has effectively reduced the nation to economic serfdom, which is technically legal, but is no less criminal. Jewish media magnate Paul Bronfman may have pulled funding from York University for its anti-Israel mural, but I'd be curious to know if he and his Rothschild-connected kin, who own the Seeger & Company, whose patriarch Edgar Bronfman was the head of the World Jewish Congress for a quarter of a century, whose brother and son sit on the famous board of 300, whose daughters Sarah and Claire are members of Nexium, which has been implicated in immigration fraud in addition to sex trafficking, and whose grandson Stephen Bronfman is the Liberal Party's chief fundraiser, providing Trudeau and his allies with their war chest. Oops. The support of the UN High Commission of Refugees discussions with Israel to ship their 40,000 plus African deportees not back to Africa, but to safe Western countries including Canada. As Tet Lim Nye writes, as a collective term, Israel provides the Jews as the backbone of the story of their descent with their collective, quote, location, unquote. 70% of Jews in Israel favour the deportation of illegal infiltrators, as Netanyahu calls them, whereas 70% of Jews in North America support amnesty for illegal aliens. I can't imagine that 70% would oppose more multicultural enrichment in the form of additional tens of thousands of Africans to Israel. And from the birth control pill to abortion to the prevalence of Gentile circumcision, there is no question that even the most intimate and essential elements of our society have been thoroughly Judaized. But let's look at the word Judai. Is it Jud-AI? Jud means doctor of canon and civil law, and hence the term of Jud Jews. And why you have terms like jury, jurisdiction, and justice, as jur, just, and jud are all varying forms and part of the root words of law and justice. And jud is a varying form of Jordan. Jordan means the tribe of Horus. The Greek form of jud is Jude. Hey Jude, sang by the Tavistock creative group The Beatles. And given the fact that the Jewish religion itself is based purely on laws and not actually on religion itself, perhaps the term Judei means the laws of the AI, which is artificial intelligence. Does that make more sense now? Who passed the judgment and the law on the person known as, quote, Jesus, unquote, Jud as, which means as law. Law is all done in Latin. Latin is the language of the Anunnaki, and so legalese, which is defined as the specialized language of the legal profession, and the language used by lawyers that is difficult for most people to understand. That is the actual description of that word. And it's difficult to understand as it's not from here is why. And legalese actually means babble. And it is their language and why their followers hardly ever face justice. They pass all their sins onto the Gentiles by the way of the Day of Atonement ceremony. Don't believe me? Go and ask them. But when that also includes antagonism towards the host population, indeed even attitudes and policies geared towards atomizing and then destroying that host population, the locus of control becomes not just significant, but essential to identify. While a Jewish Friedrich Raphael may feel that the anti-Semitic canard that the Jews control the world's economy and in particular the press, brooks no empirical refutation, it says. From the 2015 Anti-Semitism, a book in the Provocation series by Biteback Publishing Limited and edited by the self-described lefty, liberal, anti-racist, feminist Muslim Yasmin Alibar Brown, who also went on to have a fairly vicious attack on the British white working class, I might add, and that the oldest hatred simply materializes by magic anywhere Jews appear to be in any appreciable numbers, irrespective of the time period or the civilization or racial or ethnic group in question. And it can be easily evidenced that Jews do in fact control both. And perhaps that's now, people understand now why there has been scant coverage of Jewish malfeasance in the media. So who controls Africa really? We have often heard of the white invaders purging Africa. But what is often left out is who operated those so-called white shipping peoples. And perhaps this next piece will reveal much. This group is called Africa Israel Investments Limited and is an international holding and investment company based in Yehud, Israel. The group consists of several private and public companies active in such areas as real estate, construction, infrastructure, manufacturing, tourism and leisure. The company's shares are traded on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange and are a constituent of the TA25 index. Now, this particular company became the subject of newspaper coverage in 2008 for its association with the construction of Israeli settlements on the West Bank. And in early years, the African Israel Investments, which was founded in 1934 during what is stated as the British Mandate, but it was not British at all. It wasn't English or British people that started it, as we'll find out. And it was founded by Jewish investors from South Africa who wanted to support development in the local economy of the Yishuv. And after the establishment of the State of Israel, the company expanded its commercial and financial activities and was one of the first companies in the country whose shares were traded on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. All this nonsense about the Chinese in Africa, it's the same people. In the early 1970s, control of the company was acquired by Bank Leumi. They've been in the news recently, have they not? And from 1978 to 1996, Shlomo Grothman served as the president and CEO of the company. In early 1970, Lev Leviev acquired control of the company and Grothman left. So who is Lev Leviev? Well, he is an Israeli businessman, philanthropist and investment of Uzbek Bukhari. And Bukhari is a Jewish group background, and he's also known as the King of Diamonds. Lev Leviev has a net worth of $1 billion as of March 2018 and has been a philanthropist for the Hasidic Jews causes in Eastern Europe and Israel. Beginning in the 1990s, Leviev avoided being directly involved with the Yeltsin family and nurtured ties with Vladimir Putin. And his diamond mining investments in Angola and his investments in Israeli settlements have been the target of protests. And yes, he's a prominent member of the Bukhari Jewish community, and he's also the president of the World Congress of Bukharian Jews. So who are the Bukharian Jews? Not a familiar term to many, but it refers to the Central Asian Jews of the Khanate of Bukhara, those of Samarkand and the Fergana Valley, all of Uzbekistan. Now today the region is divided between the former Soviet republics of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. The majority of Bukharan Jews live in the Uzbek cities of Samarkand, Bukhara, Tashkent and Kokand, and in Tajikistan's capital Dushanbe, and in Kyrgyzstan's capital Bishkek. And also a large number of Bukharan Jews have made Aliyah, which means a migration to Jerusalem, and have congregated in Jerusalem. Now the Bukharan Jews call themselves Israel or Yahudi and speak Bukhari or Judeo-Tajik, which is a distinct dialect of the Tajik Persian language that incorporated a number of the Hebrew words. Now we asked the question in the From Russia with Love series about the Exodus. Well, it was actually the exile out of the Garden of Eden in India. whereby what was then known as the sub-grey race, who were thrown out of India and exiled to Egypt. And we asked the question, are the Istan countries named where all these now known as Jews settled? Well, there is now more evidence of such. These people were never from what is now known as Israel, and where the mixture of the jet black peoples of India worshipping and sacrificing humans to the Kali Ma, mixing with the white Rus, and hence the term sub-grey. India herself was also an Istan country up to the 1500s. It was called Indostan. Now, the Yeltsin corruption family just mentioned we covered in From Russia with Love 6, and they are linked with the Reagan, Mitterrand and Wanta looting of Russia and the group known as Langley 1, and were more Rothschilds based than the Russian generals who protect Putin, who are more linked with the Order of the Black Sun. And for further evidence of the faction war, and in particular the diamond trade for so long ran by the Rothschilds-based Dutch through the De Beers, things took a turn in that region, as this piece reveals. As the De Beers came under fire during the Blood Diamonds furore, Leviev increasingly came to dominate the legal Angola diamond market through the Angola Selling Corporation, ASCorp, which was formed in the early 2000s, in which the Angolan government maintains half the stake in ASCorp, and Leviev and the Omega Diamonds of Antwerp, Belgium, each have about a quarter stake in it. At the same time, all contracts signed with Angolan exploration, exploitation, lapidation and trading company of diamonds, Endymia, Angola's state-owned diamond marketing company, were declared void, which hastened the De Beers' exit out of Angola and thus allowed Leviev to gain a large stake in Angolan diamonds. So essentially this was a transfer of power between the Rothschilds-based Dutch and over to the Black Sun was completed. And Leviev says he presented Angola with a plan to reduce smuggling and increase revenue by funneling diamonds through only one source, while others claim the deal was clinched through Leviev's connections with obscure Russian businessmen. Except these were not Russian businessmen at all, but Jewish-based Russians, all operating under the Black Sun. So did the Angolan people benefit from this changeover? This next piece will reveal whether they did or didn't. The Angolan government has obviously profited from this venture, but when critics queried how this company benefits not just the government but the people of Angola, he answers that the Leviev Group's heavy investments in Angolan diamonds will change the informal way of doing business into a more formalised, educated system that helps individual families. We want to help people who work with their hands, he said. We want Angolans to develop many different new skills. And yet just 7 years after the takeover, and as reported in a New York magazine in 2007, that a security company hired by Leviev has been accused by local human rights groups that year of participating in practices of humiliation, whipping, torture, sexual abuse, and in some cases assassinations. As the saying goes, new boss, same as the old boss. But Mr. Leviev also has heavy links to America and is a hidden part of the recent scandal to do with the Russian collusion and the Trump family. In an article that was published in The Guardian in July of 2017, Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, sealed a real estate deal in 2015 worth $295 million to purchase space in the former New York Times building on the 43rd Street near Times Square from Lev Leviev's firm. He bought that from Africa Israel Investments and 5 Mile Capital Group. Now later in October 16, Kushner used this space as a basis for a $285 million loan from the douche bank. The snake oil salesman himself rears his slimy head again. Jared Kushner. Now the ties between the Trump family real estate deals and the Russian money interests did attract the Justice Department Special Counsel Robert Mueller, while Mueller was investigating alleged Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. Except it wasn't Russians that was doing it. It was the Jewish. And we'll have further evidence later. So what is that saying? Well, the Russian collusion is a smokescreen between the Rothschilds and the Black Sun factions. And as I just said, it's not actually Russian collusion, but Jewish collusion, as evidence in that piece. And this is what I've consistently warned of Trump's involvement with the Israeli elements from as far back as 2015. And I know some QAnons are starting to question Q, saying what about the Israelis? And the response is they will be last. But the great question is it they will be last to be dealt with, or will they be the last ones standing? Trusting the plan is not good enough for an investigative journalist. Just what that plan is the great question we should all ask. Right, let's delve more into this African-Israeli investments and also Lev Leviev, and see how far this overreach goes. Now, in November of '96, the diamond cutter and diamond merchant Lev Leviev acquired control from Bank Leumi, and he soon expanded the group's activities into new markets and also territories, including energy, Dor Alon in Israel, US and Europe, real estate, AFI development in Russia, America and Europe, manufacturing, AFI industries by acquiring Packer Plada. Now, following the financial crisis in 2007 and 8, the company was hurt by the drop of real estate values in the United States, Russia and also Eastern Europe. And it decided to default on a series of bonds, and in 2010 it restructured 7.4 billion shekels of debt, which is about $2.25 billion. In 2016, the company sought a second debt settlement. And that sounds all very Trump-esque, that to me. And it's how these greed-based people just eliminate their debt and carry on regardless. Trump went bankrupt 6 times and was bailed out at least 4 times by Rothschild's loans. And yet, none of their homes were foreclosed on, or businesses. And in a recorded conversation that was leaked to Israel Channel 10 News, Lev Leviev is heard saying, quote, "I shit on every bank, but they haven't been able to make me move a centimetre because I don't owe them any of the money. To no bank in the world. I piss on every bank from above, even Rakafet," which is referring to Bank Leumi CEO Rakafet Ruzak Aminoch. But it's interesting to note that he says, "I shit on every bank." And this could well be another reference to the Rothschilds banking system being discredited by a member of the Black Sun group. Remember, the Black Sun took over the Fed under BlackRock, and both Trump and Q supported it. And the Fed is actually owned by neither the Rothschilds or the Black Sun, but the Trust. Now, the company came under controversy and became subject of newspaper coverage back in 2008 for Leviev's association with the construction of Israeli settlements on the West Bank. And the British Embassy in Israel was planning to move into Kiryat Tower, which is one of its buildings, but cancelled when these ties were revealed in the British media. Now remember, the British is heavily ran by the Rothschilds clan. And in September of 2009, Leviev's empire was actually on the verge of collapse. And during the real estate bubble of the early 2000s, he had borrowed huge sums of money to acquire property around the world, including America. And as American real estate prices plummeted and market values declined to less than half of what Leviev had paid for properties, so did the value of Africa-Israel investments. And Leviev was quoted as saying, "Our main mistake was the investments in the US. Greed knows no bounds, it seems." Then in 2009, Africa-Israel's recently constructed private prison near Beersheba was banned by the Israel High Court of Justice, and the prison had not yet been occupied when it was declared unconstitutional. This is again a clash of the Rothschilds and the Black Sun. And in 2009, BlackRock divested from the company. See the connections now? Allegedly due to the firm's involvement in the West Bank settlement construction. This is confirming the Black Sun links. BlackRock were involved with this group back in the 2000s. Now, following campaigning by the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement in January 2010, Danske Bank added Africa-Israel to the list of companies that fail its socially responsible investment policy. And a bank spokesman noted that it was acting in the interest of its customers by not placing their money in companies that violate international standards. Only all banks did that, and for the people's reason, not for faction fighting. In October 2011, Africa-Israel sold Manhattan's clock tower for $165 million, increasing its cash flow by $88 million. In the third quarter of 2011, Africa-Israel made a profit of $148 million. Nice that, considering they were bankrupt 2 years previous. And the company recorded net gains in real estate investment for the first 9 months of 2011 in the amount of 712 million shekels, which is $188 million, of which 159 million were recorded just in the third quarter alone. All the bank bailouts had taken place by then, you see, so they put more money in. As all the values of all the properties fell, they bought them all up. On January the 30th, 2014, the government pension fund of Norway excluded Africa-Israel investments from its portfolio, citing serious violations of individual rights in situations of war or conflict. So they're involved in the pension funds also. In November of 14, the Cypriot AFI Development plc, which did not file its 2012 financial results indicator report and delayed its filing in 2013 until March the 18th, 2014, was fined by the Cyprus SEC for lack of transparency and a violation of Section 13 of the law for not releasing its results connected with Africa-Israel investments. Now, their major holdings were, as I said, was in real estate. AFI Development, AFI Russia, a public company that's traded in the London Stock Exchange, was founded in 2001, and this company is one of the largest real estate development companies in Russia, focusing on large-scale projects in Moscow and other main cities in Russia in the residential, offices, shopping malls, hotels and infrastructure sectors such as the Mall of Russia and the Tverskaya Zastava site. AFI USA. Established in 2002, the company focuses on exclusive residential projects, income-producing properties and hotels. We're going to hear the snake oil salesman again soon. And feel it. And the company is active in New York, where it owns the New York Times building, the Clock Tower and the Apthorpe exclusive residential building, which was a property owned and created by the Bloodline family known as the Astors. It's moreover active in Miami, Los Angeles and Phoenix, and is a partner in the Hard Rock amusement park in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which has since been closed as I understand, and holds building rights for a mega project in Las Vegas. AFI Europe. The company has been coordinating the group's activities in Europe since 1998, and it owns residential, office and shopping mall projects in the Czech Republic, Serbia, Bulgaria, hello CIA, Romania, Poland, Hungary, Germany and Latvia. Hello NATO countries. And among its outstanding assets is the Palace Florimel in Prague, and it's building the Cotroceni Park in Bucharest, which upon its completion will become the largest mall in Romania. Cotroceni Park opened in October of 2009 as the AFI Palace Cotroceni. But what is interesting to note is only a few years after that whole region was destroyed by war. That this group moved in on all of them and then took over. Pre-planned? You bet it was. And this is a repeated tactic, and for further evidence, see which group took over Russia after the so-called Bolshevik Revolution. 80% of the power structure were Jewish, who then took over all of the oil in Russia and created oligarchs, or best name as oligarchs. And most of those who ran them companies were of Jewish origin, like Roman Abramovich. And then you come to Africa-Israel Residences, a public company traded on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, operating in Israel under the Savonium brand name. Africa-Israel develops entire neighbourhoods including shopping centres, schools, green areas, cultural and sports facilities. AFI Properties, another company traded on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, holding shopping centres and office buildings. And the brand name Savionim is kind of interesting, as Savion means new house. Oh my. And then we come to construction and infrastructures. Danya Sebus is the construction and infrastructures arm of Africa Israel, again listed on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, and is involved in major infrastructure projects in Israel, Russia, Romania and North America. BOT and PFI projects. Africa Israel owns 37.5% of the company operating as the Cross Israel Highway, which was Israel's first toll road. Other BOT and PFI activities include Highway 431, Israel's first private penitentiary, student dormitories at the Hebrew University and the Tel Aviv Light Rail. Next, they're involved in energy and food retail. The Alon Group, ALON, which is Israel's largest international energy group. Alon USA Energy, which operates the Big Spring refinery, owns 1,700 FINA gas stations in several states, terminals, more than 1,850 miles of oil pipelines, asphalt factories, and more than 170 7-Eleven convenience stores in America. Door Energy, a national network of gas stations and super Alonite convenience stores in Israel, controlling also Blue Square, which is Israel's second largest supermarket chain. Who knew that over 10% of America's 7-Elevens were owned by this group? Then we come to industry. AFI Industries. Africa Israel holds a major interest in AFI Industries, formerly Packer Plada, and Israel's largest steel company, and Negev Ceramics, the country's leading company in design and manufacture of building and interior design and ceramic products. AFI Industries is also active in Russia and intends to expand its activities to additional countries. Tourism and leisure. Africa Israel Hotels holds the Crown Plaza and Holiday Inn franchise in Israel. It operates 10 hotels in Israel, a spa hotel in Russia, a hotel in Germany, 3 hotels in Bucharest, and is expanding its operations into Europe, and it also holds and operates an amusement park in Eilat, Israel. That kind of fits in with the CIA, does it not? Who claims rights to most of the US hotels, and also all of the Home Depots are owned by the CIA, as well as the former Radio Shack stores. Fashion. The company's fashion brands include Gotex, Gideon Oberson, Christina, that's in Canada, and other beachwear international brands, and the Zara and Pull & Bear franchises in Israel. Lev Leviev and the Africa Israel Group acquired Gotex in 1997 from its founder and chief designer Leah Gottlieb. After about a year heading the design team, Gottlieb left the company. They're also involved in communications and media. The company has a controlling stake in Tadiran Telecom, which develops telecom solutions, and in Channel 9 Israel, which is a TV station serving Russian speakers. Is that Russian again? Why does the term Israel and Russia come up so often? Because they're ran by the same people as why. and then you will make more sense of the American elections and the collusion. Now, they've had some recent disposals. In June 2009, the Africa Israel Group sold its 50% stake in the Gotek swimwear firm to its joint venture partners for $11.3 million. And in March 2009, Africa Israel Properties sold its stakes in 2 shopping centres in the Tel Aviv area to Melesron, who is a company controlled by the Ofer Brothers Group. Now, the Ofer family is one of the 20 families that control 25% of Israel's exchange-listed companies, OFER. In 2011, the US State Department imposed sanctions on the company for violating the Iranian sanctions regime. And another example of them playing both sides and also working with Iran to corrupt it for their own ends. Now, according to the State Department, the OFER subsidiary based in, no surprise here, Singapore. You connecting more dots now? Hi, Dan. Had sold a ship to Iran in 2010. Links to Singapore and the many clown-based programs that are run out of that country. And the former Mossad director, Meir Dagan, has said that he does not believe any laws were broken by the company's business dealings in Iran. Well, of course not. As mentioned earlier, they are the law under the Judd terminology. They are the law, which according to company statements involved the transport of oil, no surprise, and petroleum products in a manner permitted under the sanctions regime. That's the oil deal. But it's interesting that Mossad would chime in, as they are involved heavily in Iran and also ISIS, Israeli Security Intelligence Services, and many other so-called terrorist groups, including Hezbollah. Now, there is a series called Mossad on Netflix that confirms much of how they operate within that organisation. And they're not operating on behalf of the Israeli people, but the Zionist regime. And most of their perceived enemies are actually stooges and friends of theirs. Go and check it out, unless they pull that like they did with Continue. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu's office denied allegations that the company's dealings in Iran had been authorised by the State of Israel. Yeah, right. Of course he would, because he, Mr. Netanyahu, along with Obama, Muslim Brotherhood, Bush, and the Iranian Ayatollah Khamenei are all in on the free oil deal within that region. They've all got 25% stakes. The leader of Israel and the leader of Iran are doing oil deals. And the idea that Iran is the enemy is as fake as the American and Russian Cold War nonsense. Now, after Sami Ofer's death in 2011, Netanyahu made a public statement commending Ofer as a, quote, true Zionist, unquote. Indeed, Zionists, whilst operating under the Jewish religion, are not Jews at all, but dark force psychopaths running an Anunnaki program of destruction against the human race. And they've been doing that for at least 110,000 years, and mainly against the white race. Now, we have a lot of issues going on with a group known as Black Lives Matter, and they're complaining of their abuse of the past and demanding reparations and all kinds of other things. But the Black Lives Matter and black people in general are being played like a fiddle by these same people. Black Lives Matter is formed by the Soros group, who is Jewish. So let's find out the connections between the Jewish and the black slavery, shall we? And these are some facts taken from the Jewish Encyclopedia itself. The Jewish Encyclopedia itself, of who ran the slavery ships and who really owned them. So before you carry on with your Black Lives Matter, find out who your paymasters are, because it was them that used you as slaves all along. And not just black people either. There was white slaves being run long before the black people. The ship Abigail, owners Aaron Lopez, Moses Levy, Jacob Franks, ethnicity Jews. The ship Crown, owners Isaac Levy, Nathan Simpson, ethnicity Jews. The ship Nassau, owners Moses Levy, ethnicity Jew. The ship Four Sisters, owners Moses Levy, ethnicity Jew. The ship Anna and Elysia, owners Justice Bosch and John Abrams, ethnicity Jews. The ship Prudent Betty, owners Henry Kruger and Jakob Phoenix, ethnicity Jews. The ship Hester, owners Mordecai and David Gomez, ethnicity Jews. The ship Elizabeth, owners Mordecai and David Gomez again, Jews. The ship Antigua, Nathan Marston and Abram Lyle, ethnicity Jews. The ship Betsy, owners William de Wolfe, ethnicity Jew. The ship Polly, owners James de Wolfe, ethnicity Jew. The ship White Horse, owners Jan de Svets, ethnicity Jews. The ship Expedition, the owners John and Jacob Roosevelt, ethnicity Jews. The ship Charlotte, owners Moses and Sam Levy and Jacob Franks, ethnicity Jews. The ship Karakoa, owners Moses and Sam Levy, ethnicity Jews. You still think that white people are the problem? We've all been played black, white, yellow, brown and red by the grey race. This was taken from the Jewish Encyclopedia. Quote, the cotton plantations in many parts of the South America were wholly in the hands of the Jews, and as a consequence, slavery found its advocates among them. Quite an overreach, and proves the story they put out about the whites' harvest in Africa was actually done by this Hebrew group of harvesters, and the same applies to North, South and Central America. Now, this is not to say that some whites did not commit atrocities within those countries, although it's often overlooked that much of the rampaging and pillaging was actually done by Hispanics. the Portuguese and the Spanish. There was serious crimes done here by Europeans, but all at the behest of the Hebrew paymasters, with the desire to take over everyone's land. And with the term Jud AI perhaps defined, it now makes much more sense to what is playing out now with the technology overreach, does it not? Right. So having established the main over virtually every industry in a plethora of countries, and we're going to look next at their entrance into the technology world, along with espionage and global interference. And this piece was mentioned recently in one of our main shows, but it's worth repeating again to get the overall picture. And this was called Operation Blackout, and it was a 2019 exercise simulating sabotage of civilian infrastructure, terrorism and psychological operations against American citizens on the day of the US 2020 election. Russian collusion or Jewish collusion? Now, the private-based US-based company, which is Israel-founded company called Cyber, organised all this with members of the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI and the US Secret Service, and also the law firm Venable. So who are Venable? Well, they're out of Washington, D.C., and this is their spiel. As the federal government's regulatory reach expands, it is more important than ever to have a finger on the pulse of legislative and executive branch decision makers in Washington. Long recognised as one of the capital's leading law firms, Venable's Washington offices helps clients understand how evolving regulatory and policy issues can affect their businesses. The firm also assists clients in making their voices heard as policy is being crafted through both direct lobbying and the management of numerous issue-focused industry coalitions. Crafted through lobbying. Sounds like AIPAC and J Street, that to me. But does anyone ask why we need an Israeli PR or lobbyist group operating in the heart of our political region? Just who is running this country is a question all American people need to demand answers to. But as long as this power takeover continues, this country will continue to slide into oblivion. Now, the office includes the nation's preeminent privacy and data protection practice, well, I never, as well as a renowned regulatory practice. And Venable's regulatory team includes many former government agency officials who represent clients in the advertising and marketing, food and drug law, as well as telecommunications, environmental, international trade and banking and financial services areas. Former government agency officials. Oh my, here comes Langley again. Now, Cyber is led by ex-members of the Israel's military intelligence unit called the 8200, which is best known for its cyber offensives against other governments. Is best known for its cyber offensive against other governments. Just keep hold of that. and is advised by the former top and current officials in both Israeli military intelligence and also, no surprise again, the CIA. Now the 8200 unit, like I said, we covered in the show, but it is an Israeli intelligence corps unit responsible for collecting signal intelligence and code decryption. And that's why the CIA is involved, because the CIA and the NSA created crypto. You don't think they didn't put a back door into it, did you, when they created it? No, I've got crypted email. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. And military publications include references to the Unit 8200 as the central collection unit of the intelligence corps, and is sometimes referred to as Israeli SIGINT National Unit. It is subordinate to Amman, the Military Intelligence Directorate. Amman becomes Ammon, becomes Amun, as in Amun-Ra. It's not a coincidence. It's a bit like NATO, who's run by this group also, which is actually an anagram of Aton, and yes, they're connected. Now the reason being is the exodus out of Egypt did not go to Jerusalem or anywhere near it, but Ammon in Jordan, now known as Amman. Jordan means tribe of Horus, son of Isis, and so Isis and Ra were classed as gods, became Is-Ra-El. Now, Unit 8200 was established in 1952, it was said, using primitive surplus American military equipment. It's nice to know even that far back the American peoples were funding these people and this country. And the unit is comprised primarily of 18 to 21 year olds. And as a result of the youth of the soldiers in the unit and the shortness of their service period, the unit relies on selecting recruits with the ability for rapid adaptation and speedy learning. And after-school programs for 16 to 18 year olds teaching computer code and hacking skills, how nice that is, also serve as a feeder programs for the unit. Now, the former 8200 unit soldiers have, after completing their military service, gone on to founding and occupying top positions in many international IT companies and also in Silicon Valley. Connecting more of the dots now. So the Silicon Valley companies confirms our earlier From Russia with Love shows of their connectivity with the CIA and the NSA as one giant spying, hacking and subversion group. And according to the Director of Military Sciences at the Royal United Services Institute, Unit 8200 is probably the foremost technical intelligence agency in the world and stands on a par with the NSA in everything except scale. In addition, it is funded by and partnered with top US weapons manufacturer and government contractor Lockheed Martin, and financial institutions with clear and direct ties to the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and also, surprise, surprise, the White House advisor and the President's son-in-law, snake oil himself, Mr. Jared Kushner again. It's funny how he pops up so many times, is it not? Well, actually, it's not funny. Now, in 2010, the French newspaper Le Monde Diplomatique wrote that the Unit 8200 operates a large SIGINT base in the Negev, and is one of the largest listening bases in the world, capable of monitoring phone calls, emails and other communications throughout the Middle East, Europe, Asia and Africa, as well as tracking ships. And the Unit 8200 also reportedly maintains covert listening posts in Israel embassies abroad. It taps undersea cables, maintains covert listening units in the Palestinian territories, and has Gulfstream jets equipped with electronic surveillance equipment. Ronan Bergman says in his 2009 book that a Hezbollah bomb disguised as a cell phone was picked up by agents and taken for an investigation to the Unit 8200's headquarters in February 1999. And once inside the laboratory, the cell phone exploded and 2 of the soldiers were injured. In 2010, the New York Times cited a former member of the United States intelligence community alleging that this unit used a secret kill switch to deactivate Syrian air defences during Operation Orchard. Now, Operation Orchard was an Israeli airstrike on a suspected nuclear reactor referred to as the Al-Kibar site, and also referred to in IAEA documents as Deir al-Zor in the Deir ez-Zor region of Syria, which occurred just after midnight local time on September the 6th, 2007. Now, the Israeli and US governments did not announce the secret raids for 7 months. The White House and the CIA subsequently confirmed that American intelligence had also indicated the site was a nuclear facility with a military purpose, though Syria denies this. The great question is, why is the White House and the CIA involved in this at all? And why aren't the American people making them accountable? Now, in 2014, 43 veterans of Unit 8200 signed a protest letter decrying what they called the Electronic Surveillance Unit's abusive gathering of Palestinians' private information, and in response to 200 other reservists signed a counter-protest letter. Now, according to the New York Times, the Unit 8200's hack of the Kaspersky lab allowed them to watch in real time as Russian government hackers, which were actually Jewish, searched computers around the world for American intelligence programs. Like I said, this is a complete and utter lie. And the reason being is the CIA, the KGB 1 and 2, CIA 1 through 4, Mossad, GCHQ and MI5 and MI6, along with Pine Gap in Australia, have all been working together since the 1940s. There is no country-to-country espionage between those groups. They all work together. Now, the Israelis who hacked into Kaspersky's own network then alerted the United States to the broad Russian intrusion of US systems. It's rubbish. But then you find out that Kaspersky, although is a Russian company, was actually operated by a UK holding company. And Kaspersky also worked for the KGB. So, although it may look separate as a company, and it's convenient because it's Russian, so then the media in America, Israel and Britain can all blame Russia, it's not. And is ran by the same people across the Five Eyes group. Now, Cybereason's CEO, Lev Leviev, has openly admitted that he views his work at Cybereason as a continuation of his service to Israel's intelligence apparatus. And the Israeli Cybereason has discreetly become a major software provider to the US government and military through its direct partnership with Lockheed Martin, oh my, which followed the defence company's decision to open an office, this is Lockheed Martin, at the Israeli military's new cyber operations hub in the Negev desert. So, Lockheed Martin have a company inside the Israeli intelligence network in Israel. Do people not think this is a national security issue and a conflict of American interests? Lockheed Martin is one of the largest companies in the aerospace, military, support, security and technologies industry. It's that overreach again. And is the world's largest defence contractor based on revenue for the fiscal year 2014. And in 2013, 78% of Lockheed Martin's revenues came from military sales. And it also topped the list of US federal government contractors and received nearly 10% of the funds that were paid out by the Pentagon. In 2009, US government contracts accounted for $38.4 billion, 85%. Foreign government contracts of $5.8 billion, 13%, and commercial and other contracts for $900 million, 2%. All going to Lockheed Martin. For the Mars Climate Orbiter, Lockheed Martin incorrectly provided NASA with software using measurements in US customary force units when metric was expected, and this resulted in the loss of the orbiter at a cost of $125 million of American people's money. Did anyone get fired? No. The development of the spacecraft had cost $193.1 million. So this simulation, titled Operation Blackout, was set in a fictional US swing state called Adversaria, and it pitted a red team of ethical hackers, and the ethical hackers were from Cybereason, academics and security professionals from the private sector. And they were simulating an anarchic group's attempts to undermine, quote, democratic institutions. America is not democracy, by the way, and systems of governance, especially by creating havoc during the election, but apparently not wanting to cancel the election. Just cause enough confusion, you see. Order out of chaos. Where have we heard that before? And the team was led by Cybereason co-founder Jonathan Stream Amit, a former contractor for the Israeli government agencies and former operative for the elite Israeli military intelligence unit, the 8200. And they were fighting against a blue team of veteran law enforcement officers from the US Secret Service, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and the Arlington, Virginia Police. Why use them? For Arlington, read the CIA. And the opposing teams were supervised by a white team composed of members of Cybereason staff and Ari Schwartz, a former member of the White House National Security Council and also the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who set the rules of the simulation and would ultimately decide its outcome. Now, Swartz also used to work for the Centre for Democracy and Technology and is a major backer of Microsoft's Election Guard software. Oh my. The Red Team implemented a fantastic set of moves, it is said, that demonstrated daring and creativity, including using, quote, autonomous vehicles were leveraged to wreak havoc at polling stations and cause many deaths and injuries. And yet they described this team as ethical hacking. How is this in any way ethical hacking? Is kind of left unexplained. But the Red Team also used false flag operations and psychological warfare. Sound familiar? When the Red Team crash autonomous buses and cars into the polling lines and polling locations, the team makes ISIS, a group not without ties to Israeli intelligence, I might add, then claim responsibility. In addition, deep fakes were used by the Red Team to impersonate the superiors of pollsters and law enforcement officers and direct them to execute actions that benefited the Red Team. Deep fakes were used to create fake videos and spread misinformation about the candidates in the race. Accounts of media influencers were hacked. Telecom networks and news outlets within the fictitious states were also hacked and flooded with deep fakes aimed at spreading disinformation and panic amongst US citizens. However, in a somewhat curious conclusion, it is said, to undermine but not cancel, the primary mission of the Red Team failed due to overkill. So instead of undermining the election, they forced the Blue Team to cancel the election, and they caused a terrorist attack in the simulation. This is the way these people operate. They'll tell you it's a simulation, but those simulations often end up being real, as we'll find out in November. Hopefully not. And the exercise concluded that having clear channels of information or disinformation was very important for affecting the public sentiment for both sides, including control of social media networks for journalists, influencers and political figures that allowed the Red Team to easily spread misinformation through supposedly legitimate channels. Well, as we proved earlier, there are no legitimate channels. They're all corrupt. And the exercise explicitly excluded hacking election equipment from consideration to focus instead on everything else in the electoral system. Cyberreason and unnamed former members of the British government and the Metropolitan Police repeated this exercise on December the 11th, 2019 in what is called Operation Blackout London. And this time it was a fictitious UK city, again called Adversaria. Both teams, it said, performed well, and they deployed a number of tactics and techniques throughout Operation Blackout London. However, in the end, the Red Team wasn't able to achieve its goals, and the Blue Team scored a clear victory because they were able to maintain its goals of limiting disruptions and maintaining normalcy, is that the new normal, and open and free elections. And it said, with many excellent former government and law enforcement experts on my team, we were able to counter Red's moves and maintain public trust, according to Alessandro Talami, who is a senior director at Cyberreason and Operation Blackout London Blue Team leader. The participants were Ari Schwartz, Cyber Reason, Israel Barak, Sam Curry, Sanath Clough, Jonathan Stream Amit. All Jewish. There has been a largely an untold history of these people operating as Jews as they claim, but many details reveal these people are not Jews per se. Thrown out of 106 countries in 2,000 years for the same issues of subversion of the local population, takeover of their lands, and imposing of their culture and stated religion. The Christian and Muslim religions were direct creations of Hebrewism and the Torah, which is a watered-down version of the Talmud. The Eastern religions were created and or corrupted by the same group that started in India thousands of years ago. But here are some of the past quotes, and although the term Christian is used in much of it, despite Christendom being created by the same people, it underlines the classic program passed down from generation to generation of divide and conquer. Saint Justin, who was a martyr, stated in 116 AD, quote, "The Jews were behind all the persecutions of the Christians. They wandered through the country everywhere, hating and undermining the Christian faith." Unquote. Now this next particular sentence is now making the rounds throughout the internet, and the cover-up has begun. And Jewish people, largely made up of agents, rushed to the blogs to defend it or discount it. But I must appeal to the Jewish people. These bands of people are and have misrepresented you for many thousands of years, and it is they that brings you most angst, oppression, hate and deaths for many years. These psychopaths care not one iota for Jewish people. They leave you struggling for land and food, force others off of their land and place you, the Jewish people, in harm's way. All based on a fake book they wrote. Once on the land and you run the gauntlet of hostile native people, they then take over the land and then charge you for it, both in currency and blood. It's time to wake up. But this is the sentence that they are trying to cover up. Me wee gifs at the ready, please. Dio Cassius, 2nd century Roman historian, describing the savage Jewish uprising against the Roman Empire that has been acknowledged as the turning point downward in the course of that great state form. Quote, "The Jews were destroying both the Greeks and Romans. They ate the flesh of their victims, made belts for themselves out of their entrails, and daubed themselves with their blood. In all, 220,000 men perished in Cyrene and 240,000 in Cyprus." Unquote. Now in this time period, these psychopaths were not known as Jews per se, but Egyptians, the same peoples and off-world entities thrown out of the Garden of Eden in India. And then we come to H. Beamish, New York speech, 1937, quote, communism is Judaism. The Jewish Revolution in Russia was in 1918, unquote. Hilary Cotter, author of The Cardinal Mizenti, The Truth About His Real Crime, page 6, quote, communism and Judaism are one and the same, unquote. Gregory XIII declared that Jews continue to plot horrible crimes against Christians with daily increasing audacity. Gregory VIII forbade Jews to have power over Christians in a letter to Alfonso VI of Castile. Gregory IX condemned the Talmud as containing every kind of vileness and blasphemy against Christian doctrine. And if anyone has any doubts about this show or that last statement, I ask you all to go and read what is contained within the Talmud. It is the most racist and vile preachings ever on this planet, and shows why those who follow it have no regard for any humans, including their own so-called people. Gregory I protested wholesale circumcision of Christian slaves by Jewish traders. Oops! Christian slaves by Jewish traders, who monopolized the slave trade in Europe and the Middle East and were widely suspected of supplying white girls to Oriental and African buyers. Oh my. I guess the historians didn't tell you that, Black Lives Matter, did they? Now, the act of circumcision, which is common amongst Muslims and Jews, and now highly prevalent throughout America, proving the Jewish influence here, is unnecessary, anti-sovereign for the child, and barbaric in equal measure. Please stop circumcising your children. It provides no proven medical benefits, it reduces sensitivity, and has infectious implications. Now, this practice, predictably, like most out of Israel, came out of Egypt, as with the equally barbaric female circumcision. Same peoples is why. But there are other reasons behind this practice. A, collecting DNA. B, it's used in products. And C, certain strains of Jewish practice choose to not medically cut off the foreskin, but actually bite it off with their teeth. Which equates to pedophilia. Don't care who you are, you can argue all you like. That is pedophilia. Which, according to the Talmud, is okay for a girl at age 3 years and 1 day and a boy 9 years and 1 day, and they can be used sexually. These people are sick. Sylvester I condemned Jewish anti-Christian activity. Cardinal Mizenti of Hungary, quoted in Berith Messenger in January 1949, said, quote, "The troublemakers in Hungary are the Jews. They demoralise our country and they are the leaders of the revolutionary gang that is torturing Hungary," unquote. A.N. Field, in Today's Greatest Problem, quote, "Once the Jewishness of Bolshevism is understood, its otherwise puzzling features become understandable. Hatred of Christianity for instance, is not a Russian characteristic, it is a Jewish one." Unquote. Henry Ford in the Dearborn Independent, February 1921, quote, "Jews have always controlled the business. The motion picture influence of the United States and Canada is exclusively under the control, moral and financial, of the Jewish manipulators of the public mind." Unquote. For those who have followed our From Russia with Love series, this type of report will come as no surprise. In fact, we could have forecasted it. And this is exactly how these clowns operate, spending vast fortunes on running sinister plots via computer simulation games that always involves terror. What is wrong with these people? Why is the $10 billion plus given to erroneously by the American people funding this type of skullduggery? The media will tell you it's $3.8 billion a year. The real figure is over $10 billion per year. Go and check it out yourself. Why can't they run these computer simulation scenarios for peace or to feed people? Why can't they take the many Jewish people out of the 14 to 15 million globally out of poverty? Why are the non-compete companies like Lockheed Martin operating on their behalf? And for those new, Lockheed Martin and several other so-called government contractors all get their materials at 50% of cost under a 1976 non-compete agreement signed off by the American government. Is Lockheed Martin another front company designed to funnel more American taxpayers' money to Israel as well? Where does Trump stand in all of this? Now, the Trump administration has changed course in various ways from his predecessor when it comes to relations with Israel. But among other things, the current American government has moved the US Embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, recognised Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and reduced aid to the Palestinians. The same Golan Heights are now called the Trump Heights. Golan Heights are in Syria, not Israel, I might add. And then we have this. The organisations that created the original Trump Cyrus coin are now minting a special edition 70-year redemption coin, focusing on generating an international effort to build the Third Temple. Building the Third Temple for one world government and more children sacrificing. Seriously? In the context of the coin, we are expressing gratitude for President Trump's bold decision to transfer the American embassy to Jerusalem, thereby recognizing King David's capital and the site of Solomon's temple as the true capital of Israel. Unquote. Except Solomon fell, and that temple was built by the demons, and both David and Solomon were Egyptians, not Israelis. Cyrus was Persian and also not Israeli, and yet again an example of claiming all regions and histories as their own. I have the perfect song for these harvesting, greed-based, perverted psychopaths. We'll be back with the final portion of this show after this song. This show will elicit many different reactions, and it should. And I request you all to do your own investigations and research on the material laid out within the show. It is important each person gets their own perspective and understanding on this matter to then see for themselves whether what has been presented today is real and in truth. And it lays out the problems we face. It lays out for the need for all peoples to come together and defeat these psychopaths. Now, to some it will seem an insurmountable task, but remember they've done this for thousands of years and it was all hidden from the people. With shows like this and many others on the internet, it's now being exposed for everyone to see. And that is a positive, not a negative. Because these dark forces are now being pushed into the light for many more to see and hopefully counteract. I don't care which religion or country you are from. These people who masquerade as Jews are a problem to us all. And we must all come together to expose them for what they are, pure evil. Summing up this very detailed piece shows the overreach this group of people have, and having already covered that there are only 14 to a maximum 17 million Jews globally, just how have they reached the pinnacles of power in almost every country? Just why do they have most countries dancing to their greed and harvesting-based tune, creating terror and fear wherever they lay their footprint? Why do they seem to lay claim to whole countries, cultures, religions and histories that all has to match with their story? Or the threats of persecution, execution and destruction gets wheeled out? You have heard of their ownership of vast quantities of corporations and amongst the world's richest, and yet possibly as many as 10 to 12 million of their shared religion people live in abject poverty. These are the same people that push their kind into several countries to create conflict, and they sneak in behind them and lay claim to land and territories. Just like the settlements, pushing Jewish people into harm's way as their totalitarian creep moves across the region, stated to be because God allocated them that land. Which God? Why would God only protect one people? And if these people are so special, why didn't the same God save the Jews from the camps? And why were Jewish people involved in the implementation of torture and human experimentation on them in the same camps? So God said in some book the land belongs to Israel. Well, no God has ever written a book, so that's bullshit for a start. Never, not any of them. But the land now known as Israel never existed under that name ever in history. And it was created by the Rothschilds clan along with the British Jewish establishment. It has never been ascertained to this day who wrote the so-called book called the Bible, and yet millions of deaths have been lost, all because of a book that no one knows or can prove who wrote it. Does this make any sense? Why is the Talmud and the protocols of the elders of Zion not readily available to the public? Just what are they hiding? Why are we still worshipping Isis, Ra, Horus and Osiris all around the world? Isis, Ra, El. Islam means Isis hidden. Switzerland, the home of the Rothschilds, means the twin sisters, which is Isis. All obelisks are nothing to do with Egypt, but the worship of Osiris and is symbolic of the penis, with the foreskin bitten off by rabbis. Sick bastards. Jordan means tribe of Horus, and so the tribe of Dan is also a tribute to Horus. The 12 tribes of Israel is really a zodiac references to the 12 houses. Zodiac means the houses. The pharaohs, which were the progenitors of this group, and pharaoh means great house. Those houses spread into Europe, and many thought they were European, but many were actually the same tribe out of Egypt. But there's a house missing, just like there's a zodiac missing called Ophiuchus, known as the serpent bearer. Just maybe the 13th tribe of Israel was from that region. Israel was never a country, but was known in so-called biblical times as the house of Israel. The house, not the country. I actually believe the term Israel is actually a spell cast, as the sudden mention of it seems to create fear, makes people subservient, makes people commit the most heinous crimes, and makes people hand over their money to these greed-based harvesters. None more so than the American government, who gives out more aid to that country than the rest of the world combined. Why aren't Americans complaining of that theft of their money? Fear is why. And this whole group, people's religion and ideology, is all based around that word, fear. It has all the religious followers spellbound, which adds weight to the fact that it's actually a spell cast, whereby the religious followers believe in the most ridiculous conspiracy theories ever. Immaculate conceptions, spontaneous combustion of bushes that then talk to you, fiery chariots on a mountain giving you a script to follow, God's chosen people, and Noah built a boat and only those on the boat survived. A 2,000-year-old plus man, dead man, will return to save us. God only designated one peoples as special and gave them a whole region of land. But did God tell these same people to harvest everyone else? Well, if you believe God wrote the Talmud, clearly he did. And is this a God we should be following? I could go on, but you get the gist. We have large parts of Western societies hating on Russia, China and Iran, and previously Iraq, because they are communists, Russian and China, when this group created communism, which is actually Judaism. Iran and Iraq was because of ancient history and the role of the Aryans, who made home there after being in Russia and the Caucasian region. Iran means the land of the Aryans, and some settled in Iraq also. These same people had the world hating Germans, when it was they, not the Germans, who were the Nazis. N-A-Z-I means National Zionism. The world previously hated the British and Dutch empires, but again, as proven, it was ran by this same group. But there is one superpower in terms of financial clout now, who largely goes untouched in terms of criticism, and that is India. Why? Because that is the land where this sub-grey group originated from, is why. And what this piece has shown also is these people are in both the remaining camps of the factions, the Rothschilds and the Black Sun. They infiltrate every group, so they always win. And ultimately, both of those factions will be destroyed as well. Yes, you heard that right. As these off-world program-based Zionists, with their plan of one world government, one world religion, one world currency, all ran from the third temple in Jerusalem, is their ultimate goal. And the wall will go from Egypt to India. Same path. Aldous Huxley once noted, a real efficient totalitarian state would be one in which the all-powerful executive of political bosses and their army of managers control a population of slaves who do not have to be coerced because they love their servitude. It is all of our duty, including the Jewish people they misrepresent, to prevent that from happening by speaking up and speaking the truth. They hate the truth, and why their army of fascists are spread all over the internet, rewriting his story and modern day events. I will end this show with one saying, that all those who not only seek the truth, but you must be the truth. And remember the fact that the truth never feared investigation. That is the antidote to this cancer on this planet. And it's time we all took responsibility to fix it. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.